Before we start today's roundtable, I want to give special thanks to Checkster, our group sponsor. Checkster has become well known in the recruiting industry by providing a platform that easily captures reference checks in the hiring process. I myself have been a customer of theirs for years. I use a reference checking tool for all of my new hires. However, Checkster has now released a new product suite called Insights. This new product suite is really what has excited me to have Checkster as the group sponsor. With Insights, the Checkster platform now covers employees from cradle to grave and not just reference checking, starting when they apply, going to offer, through onboarding, then covering their work at your company, and then to the end with exit interviews. It's an easy to use, easy to understand way of giving and getting feedback from your peers. Checkster's simple goal, to build more productive and passionate teams. Now, if this concept of getting insights from your peers regarding your work sounds familiar, it should, because that's the simple goal of this group. Connecting, communicating, collaborating. Support me, support the group. Follow the link below, recruiting.org/Checkster. This will take you to a landing page to sign up for a quick demo. If you are just thinking about automating your reference checking process, it'll be well worth your time. But I encourage you to check out the full Insights suite. I'd love to find out if you feel the way I feel about it. Now let's get to today's roundtable. All right, let's jump right into it. Thank you everybody for attending episode 81 in Let's Talk Recruiting, where we're kind of highlighting our third session in our special series called Tool Time, that's hosted by Marvin Smith and Eric Jackwith as our panelists. So with that said, Marvin, I'm not going to steal too much of the thunder, so I'm going to just stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you, and we'll jump right into it.
Thank you. So today we're going to explore the search process. And before we get started, if we could throw up a poll question, that would be great. Do you need the screen back?
Nope, I think I can do it from here.
Okay. If you take a moment and it's just a yes or no, but I'm always curious. I attend a number of different conferences and SourceCon quite a bit, and I'm always fascinated by the number of tools that are available. And one of my colleagues that I work with is Dean DaCosta, and we always kid Dean that he hasn't met a Chrome extension he doesn't like, and he has tool search start me pages that go somewhere around several thousand tools. So just curious how people think about that, and so look forward to your answers.
While we're waiting on that, Marvin, I think Dean is what you call an extreme outlier with the number of tools that he uses. I think it's crazy myself, but hey, to each their own.
Yeah. We'd love to kid him though. So, if he doesn't sleep, we don't think. He just experiments with tools while the rest of the world sleeps.
I've shared this with him when he and I were chatting. I said, I think of him as the janitor with the big set of keys on his belt. He never has a key he doesn't save and keep track of, but he'll never be able to find the key he needs when he needs to open a certain door.
Okay, I got to add in a quick comment though before we jump into it. And apologize, I digress. I had a college buddy who ran our student union in college. He wore all those keys. His name was Nels. It's like, Nels, why do you wear all those keys around your belt? He said, because I'd look foolish wearing spurs.
Good answer.
Yeah, that's a great one. Oh, that's pretty good. I mean, we're 70-30 split. So I think if you think about the great names in talent sourcing that you may follow, whether it's Susanna or Amy Beth or Sarah or Cindy or Dean or Shally or whomever it is, if you get one-on-one time with each one of them, they'll probably tell you that the best tool they have is their mind. And so today we're going to get into Eric Jackwith's mind, who has one of the brightest minds when it comes to these kinds of things. So we're gonna think about today, how do you know when you've done a good job at sourcing? How do you know that, do you have this ability to continue on that process? And really the second question I think is important, just to set up Eric's conversation today, and that is, do you have a pattern, or do you have a search process that you follow each time. And I think it's coming. Just curious about this audience.
1 second, Marvin, I'll get that going.
Okay, sorry. You can tell we put a lot of time in planning these, right? They're kind of impromptu. So it's really interesting. And so what we're really going to talk about today is the tools you use before you use the tools, all the bright, shiny ones that everybody is talking about. And so what we've tried to do in this series is to say organization is really a key component. And so we've gone through, looking at how we can organize ourselves with Outlook, and Eric showed you some of his favorite things to do. I show you a Chrome toolbar that I like to use. OneNote is something that's really near and dear to my heart. But the next step we think in the process of sharing is really the tools. What do you do yourself to make sure? What's your logic? How does your brain function? Those kind of things. So do we have the results yet?
Yep, here it comes.
Just curious. Oh, that's great. That's great. 68% have a pattern they follow. That's great. So what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Eric, and he's going to walk through some things that are near and dear to his heart. He's a master trainer and has trained many different talent sourcers and run teams of people, and so he is a wizard at this. So Eric, it's all yours.
Excellent. We're going to jump back and forth, Marvin. I'm going to share a few thoughts, and I want to really get your opinion on these things too. It's not the definitive textbook. What I would like to make sure that we engage with questions. So as I present, if you guys want to just jump in the chat room and ask a question, Sean will take a look at it and we'll get those questions answered. I've worked in both agency and talent acquisition teams in large corporations, both domestic and international. And everybody has this set of tools, be it the tools they have on their desktop, the tools that they use online through their web browsers. And we talk so much about the tools, but I really think that the tools that we build ourselves, the templates, the outlines, the spreadsheets, some of the things that we use to stay organized and keep our flow can really make the difference on how well the tools work. So many of the applicant tracking systems and CRM tools out there tend to dictate the workflow because of the tool itself. And I've been in the position where companies are looking at new tools and they want to first work on the workflow and work on how they want to do something. And then they start looking for tools that complement their workflow and the way they prefer to do things. So I also find that the second most common thing that companies tend to do is they have broad channel searches. They buy access to job boards or LinkedIn Recruiter or Seek Out, or they don't have tools. So they're looking at free and inexpensive channels that they can exploit and investigate, be it their own applicant tracking system, their own dashboard of things that they have internally that doesn't continue to cost them monthly service fees. Now, what they tend to do is they lump them all into one category and they say, okay, we gave you LinkedIn Recruiter. And so there's your first step. Go use LinkedIn Recruiter. We gave you our applicant tracking system with 2 million people in it. Go there first. And that's not refined enough. That's like saying, let's go to the internet and find candidates. It's just too broad. Where on the internet? What website? And then when you get to that website, what tools or features in that site do you need to do to make your first searches? Because we know that everybody doesn't do just one search and you're done. Normally it's an iterative process and you keep refining your searches. So you add one search to another search to a third search. And then eventually you get to the point where we'll say you're at the end of the rainbow and you're done. Either you're done because you found no one, or you're done because you feel confident that any more time spent would be a waste of time and you need to move on maybe to the next job or to the next assignment or the next client that needs your help. So those are a couple of the areas that I want to start talking about here. Is just how do you define where to go and what you do when you get there, and do you write it down? And do you write it down in a way that you can share it to the new person who joins your team next month? Or do everybody on the team have a different methodology. And someone who's supporting accounting and finance has a completely different methodology than someone who is in software engineering or supporting maybe international sales. And I think those differences make recruiters unique, because I don't want a boss to tell me everything I need to do, soup to nuts, every detail, every specific task. But I do think senior members of the team often have lessons learned they can share with more junior members, and it can really help the performance of the junior members to be able to have those outlines, those guidelines. And then once they've mastered the basics, then go off into the creative zone and try other things that maybe they're curious about, that maybe the old dogs haven't tried. And either because of they're in a rut and they have their own methodology they've used for decades or years, or simply they don't want to learn the newest way or an alternative way. Social media was like that for a long time. We had many recruiters who were very, very good at job board searching, that suddenly searching social media feeds was not what they wanted to do. So they let the younger member of the teams that didn't want to search job boards do those things. And we still have recruiters that don't even search for candidates. They just do inbound recruiting and just advertise and manage their inbox. So Marvin, I'll pause there and catch my breath. What are your thoughts about the way companies tackle the method?
I think they spend more time thinking about the tools, at least in the corporate settings I've been in, and not our own personal tools, but other than Excel spreadsheets, but thinking about, okay, we're going to invest in this tool, whether, like you said, it's LinkedIn, and we're going to have everybody use it. And they don't think through it. I mean, the difference between LinkedIn Recruiter, Seek Out, Hire Tool, and several other tools that are no offense to Seek Out, by the way, that are repurposing the public profiles. Just about everybody can have equal access to the public profiles of LinkedIn if they pay for it. And the challenge with that is you're building on things that are skill-based, very little content in terms of, if you're going to apply AI or something to it, you don't have enough information really to do a thorough job, in my opinion. You're making a best guess on what the rest of somebody's background is about. What I liked about your comment about thinking about the tools that we use before we use the tools, and to me, that's really the secret to doing this. Is we have so many different, in the corporate environment, we have so many different people that come together that have different ways of doing things, that and everything focuses on the tool, when the initial research may be more important. In other words, diving deep into the talent supply, who are the people where do they work, and that kind of competitive intelligence or market intelligence is probably more important than it is the actual tool that you're going to harvest it. And then, of course, one of my favorite subjects is, how do you engage these people, right? And how do you distinguish yourself from those? So I'm really curious about how you go through the practical search process. I've asked people for years when I meet them, tell me about your process. What do you do? And a lot of people don't have one written down. But if you ask Glenn Cathy, 2 hours later, he's still talking about that process. And it's pretty cool. I think we lost him.
Oh, Eric, you may be on mute.
Thank you. The slide that you see on the deck here, that is a slide I built almost 10 years ago for a team I was working with. And we wanted the team to really look at their process. In this particular team, nearest and newest were very important, because it was about speed. It was an agency that needed to move quickly in response and competed with other people. And they wanted candidates that were fresh and would be responsive. And they had determined quickly that candidates that were nearest to the location of the job frequently responded quicker. And if you think about that, when you've met people who took a new job recently, prior to COVID, people would brag about how short their commute is. Managers would brag about how they found someone just down the block. Now we're in the new world where nearest may not be applicable anymore. So when I found this slide, it made me laugh because we're all working virtual. Now, the second line below that, more area, more time. People don't think about this that often, but when you are, Marvin, can you try and advance that slide?
Oh, sure. I think I gave it to you.
I know I'm trying to advance it, and I seem to can't.
Okay.
There you go. You may be able to.
Can we do something real quick? We
Yes,
have
please.
a poll. We have a poll question,
Oh.
the final one.
Yes, please.
Which feeds into this is the pandemic caused you alter your approach to search, and
Yes.
I think that'll give us some insight into your audience today and
Yes,
how that'll go.
absolutely.
So,
okay, while we're waiting for that poll result to come back, I used to do a lot of work with companies that were placing contractors, and they would do a search in a 5-mile radius from their location because of the seat that the consultant would be sitting in. They wanted people nearest with short commutes because the pay scale wasn't that great and the traffic in Atlanta was pretty harsh. So they found that they had much more loyal to people who had a short commute. And they were looking for ridiculously short commute. In this case, only 5 miles, because these were call center jobs that didn't pay a lot of money, I think it was under $20 an hour for Coca-Cola at the time. So I did this illustration. Oh, look at that. 60% says yes, it's absolutely affected it. 63.
cool.
Thank you for doing that, Sean.
Yep.
So when I drew this diagram and said to people, how many 5-mile circles fit in the 20-mile circle? This is a geometry problem for those of you who hate geometry. But the idea is if it took you an hour to search for all the people in the 5-mile radius, if you needed to search a 20-mile radius of an equally dense population, how long would it take you? And most people, Marvin, go ahead to the next slide, don't get the answer right. Because it actually is area equals pi r squared, if 16 of the yellow circles, when you cut them all up, can fit inside the red circle, which means if it took you 1 hour to search a yellow space, it would take you 15 additional hours to search for candidates in their space. So if you built a poor search, you could get away with it searching a 5-mile radius. But if you built a poor search and you had a large area to search, the poor search became very difficult to filter through. Literally, it's like looking for the needle in a haystack. If the haystack is small enough, it works fine. But when you make your haystack really big, the search technique takes a lot longer in many cases. And I don't think people really, now when you see that many of our searches that recruiters are doing are nationwide, we're not even searching in the same city. We're not even searching in the same county or the same state. We have recruiters for the first time in their career touring hundreds of searches or dozens of searches a month inside a nationwide bubble where some of their techniques just aren't working real well. Marvin, next slide, please. So there's ways this was a way we did it back then. I'm just showing this as an example. I'm not saying this is the way you would want to do it every case. It's just an idea of one way to do it. And Marvin's going to show another template of a few other ways that he has used and organized with other projects he's been on. What people tend to do is rather than using nearest and newest methodology, they tend to put a search in and then just add more keywords to limit the number of people who come up. They minimize and factor out people because, 10,000 is too many. I'll add one more buzzword from the buzzword bingo and see if I can eliminate a lot of people. And oftentimes that one eliminated may be a preferred skill, not a must-have skill, or maybe a pedigree, like a previous company that we prefer some to work with, or a previous school we prefer, and we eliminate everybody that didn't go to that school or work for that company, not because they're not qualified, but because, well, there was just too many people, and I could eliminate a lot of them. And I see people do that with states also. State of California has a lot of people. They're West Coast. You can work nationwide, but let's just eliminate everybody in California because it's an East Coast job. Time zone filtering is a really dangerous thing to do because people work all different time zones in life shifts now because we're working from home. So I have lots of people who work West Coast hours even though they work on the East Coast and vice versa. So those kind of bias, we talk about unconscious bias. There are people on the East Coast who do not like people who work in California, Sean, and there's a bias towards West Coast timeframes. So I've seen that for people who work in Seattle and in California. Next slide, please. So here's an example. I would say, we always use, recruiting is like fishing in a barrel. If we make our barrel a 20-mile radius and we make our days a 90-day search frame, which is pretty typical. A lot of recruiters will say, I need someone who's been looking for a job in the last 90 days. Now, I like to expand it a lot beyond that. You could make this a 500-mile radius barrel and a 2-year depth, but it creates a construct, a barrel, if you will, an area in which we need to search. Next slide, please. Now, what you can do is you can take this and you can divide it into a test score. When you're mining for candidates or mining for just about anything, many companies will do a test score. They'll take a sample all the way down the depth in which they want. In this case, this is a 5-mile radius sample to see, are there people in this particular channel all the way down for the last 90 days or for the last 2 years, if that's your definition of how far back you're going to go. And you're just doing a quick search to see what kind of results. And what we did with the company is we would open 5 tabs, which we had 5 access points to look at different job boards, internal applicant tracking system, and websites like LinkedIn that weren't resumes but had profiles. And we would quickly do a test score. We'd build a search that was quick enough just to be able to test what was our raw numbers in each of the 5 channels. And depending on the answer, we would then spend more time in that channel doing the next few searches. Okay, so we did a quick test in the different channels to see, did that channel have a bunch of people with these few keywords, these must-have essential words, or was it simply anemic and had no one during that time frame? Next channel, please, or next slide. Okay, and then we would take, after the core was done, which found the nearest candidates, we then divided the barrel into 4 sections. We called it the tablecloth, which is, the tablecloth was the upper level, I called it the expected candidates. These are the candidates that we expected would arrive tomorrow or the next day, or weren't in the job board now. They weren't in the orange newest level. Maybe the newest level was a 7-day search, for example. We just looked at the newest candidates who applied in the last 7 to 10 days. Okay. The tabletop with people who would apply in the next 10 days or in the next 30 days out. So we'd build an agent, a search agent, that would basically look for people who weren't there today, but would be there tomorrow, that we call the tablecloth search. It was the futuristic search to capture those people who aren't there now. Then we'd do the table search because they were looking for the newest candidates. And then we had other recruiters on the team working green and yellow. We call it the donut search because we already hollowed out the core. So the middle were maybe from 2 weeks to maybe 30 days, or maybe even 60 days or 45 days. And then the bottom of the barrel were people that were aged candidates that many recruiters would say are old. And we found that a lot of those people were excellent candidates, but we had to change the depth of the barrel. We found that very few candidates actually replied between 60 and 90 days. But when we made the barrel deeper, we had great success pulling people that were between 12 and 13 months that were old. They had taken a job, and then a year later, they wanted to renew their contract and it wasn't a renewable. Or if it was a permanent job, we found people between 23 and 24 months in the barrel that were old candidates that were looking to make a job change after they left their 2-year time frame. So you can divide your color code any way you want. You can decide the size of your barrel any way you want. But this is just a way of looking. In this case, we had 5 different members of a team that would do these searches. So we had just a core team that did nearest candidates and did test drilling of the multiple channels. And then we had specialty teams that worked in the multiple channels that just did the newest, freshest candidates, others that did donut candidates in the middle of the pile, and those that did bottom of the barrel candidates. And we trained people to be able to be versatile and take different roles. And the reason why we had different people doing these was because of speed. I could give 5 recruiters 1 hour's worth of work, and each of the 5 recruiters would not run into the same candidates in the different pools they were in. They were division of labor and division of targets. Just like if you were looking for a missing child on a playground, you would give your search party different zones to go work in so you could get a lot of area covered. So that's how we did it. We had an offshore team and we had US recruiters, and we each took the zones and we worked in the zones. And in some cases, we would then rotate players, almost like a volleyball team who have a 6-man team that rotates positions. we would rotate and have someone else would check another zone just to double check we didn't miss coverage. So this is one way to do it when you're looking at search patterns. Okay, this is just physical time and date and distance and freshness, we'll call it. But this is not applicable necessarily in COVID world, not the same way. But I just wanted to give you an idea of how some companies look at the problem and how they divide the labor and the different tasks. Once you take this and divide it by channel, it can be a very good solution for great coverage to make sure that you're getting the right kind of people. I'll pause there, Marvin. What do you think?
Am I muted?
No, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I see myself muted down there. So it's wonderful. It's, you know, the first thing that came to mind was, you know, sort of shooting fish in the barrel. And then I'm sure you've heard that before. I love it. I think that I've always believed if we have a team of people and we can divide and conquer, then we're on our way. And the thing that I've learned to do over the years is to aggregate the information we get. You know, in other words, make sure we're getting as much robustness as we can out of the data that's available. And so once you get the data, I assume you go on and try to enrich it some way and find a little bit more information.
Yeah, the outreach is the next piece after the discovery. And we discovered that because we had different campaign codes for each of these blocks, we could measure, even with different letters, how different people that were found in different places at different depths of, or different colors here, in this case, how they responded to different emails. So the emails we might send to someone in the yellow area is a very different email than we may send one in the red area who's the freshest candidate that just applied in the last 24 hours. So we tailored our communications and our outreach specifically to the zone and channel they were in, and we measured them very differently. And each team had accountability to make their outreach as specific as possible and as personalized as possible relative to the channel and the age of the find.
I've always found, and I don't know whether this is true in your case, that sometimes the well-aged prospect or candidate is the best choice because we're catching them. If you can kind of imagine how often somebody changes position in a profession. So when I was at a big software company, we had a brand new ATS, and then we had the old one that was sort of homegrown. And so I would always go to the old one and find people that, you know, had expressed interest in something a couple of years ago, and then use those as my outreach. And that way I'm not competing with 100 other recruiters, and I'm getting people that are, you know, you can pick and choose that way. So I always tend towards the older person as opposed to the most immediate, particularly when it's in the agency side, because if I'm competing against a customer and they're running their own ad, they're going to pick up the active candidates. For me to bring value, I need to find the older candidates. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You know, back when we used to search daily Monster.com, you know, has a 30-day default setting for their initial search for most recruiters. We would do our tabletop searches, the orange search up there, as a 7-day search. But you can imagine the traffic candidate who posted their job on Monster.com, they had the most traffic and the most interest, and quite frankly, had some of the lowest response rates, no matter how well we wrote our material. The bottom of the barrel, which we called the aged candidates, okay, those candidates weren't bad. They were the same kind of candidates, but we built our searches differently for the bottom of the barrel, and our outreach was slightly different. And we had incredible response rates for those people because they were now again looking for a job. They were, and we divided them into 12-month and we divided them in 1 and 2 years, since a lot of statistics have shown that a lot of people reinvestigate their job search 1 year and 2 year into employment if they don't get that promotion they were hoping for, or if they feel like they've learned what they needed to learn and want to move on, especially in high tech. We also found that the types of searches we built for yellow searches were very different than red and orange searches, because you're looking at a resume that might be 2 or 3 years old. So certain frameworks that we're using currently to build websites weren't available 3 years ago. So some of the technology that we're using, the newest and latest, greatest, that you have to think, what were those people doing that they put on their resume a year or two ago that was current then, that might be the precursor to what they're doing now? And that's a different way of looking at it. Okay, so oftentimes old resumes, and that's where tools that do public web search can be very, very easy. I was doing a webinar last week, and I asked recruiters this very simple question, and I was surprised how many paused and hadn't ever thought of it before. Many recruiters will build a search, and they will say, current job title, current company must be this. I need someone who worked for Microsoft, Google, Apple, or Amazon, and they must be a software developer, programmer, or software engineer. Okay, and when they do that search, they get a specific set of back, and they get hundreds of candidates back. But when I ask even the best recruiters in the country that question, what were you missing? I was shocked how many didn't know the obvious answer. And the obvious answer is, what about everybody who was previously at Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and those companies who previously had those titles? So past title and past company. And if we think about it, if we look for only people who are at the target companies now, it's a much smaller number than the people who have ever been at the target company. Think of all the people that came through Microsoft and Google over the last decade versus how many they have on their staff right now. So searching historical data is actually a much greater set. Most people have a resume, and people who are my age in the 40s and 50s will have as many as 4 or 5, some cases 10 job titles in 10 previous companies, maybe only 3. But the point is they have more than one. But most people's resume only has a current job and a current company. So when you limit your search to current company and current job as the first search, you're missing a vast number of people. So we encourage all the recruiters that use Seekout and other tools that do public web search or any database internally, do your first search with people who have previously worked at that company, who have previous titles similar to that. Bind those together as previous company and previous search, or anybody who's ever worked in this company who maybe didn't have that exact title, but had this exact title somewhere else. So they were a developer at Uber, but they then went on and were some abbreviated name. Maybe they were engineering manager at Google. So if you build a search that says who was at Google, who previously had been a developer somewhere else, but then ended up at Google, and now they have both the pedigree and the previous title history, it's a far better search. So dividing, and some of the sites just can't do it really. Many sites can't do a search to say, find me everybody who used to be a developer, software engineer, or programmer, who is now a director or vice president. Because LinkedIn, for example, and others tools like that, they combine their previous title field, so it's one or the other. You must be a programmer or developer now or in the past. You can't say, I want to have someone who was previously a developer who is now a director. You can't even build that search on LinkedIn, but you can in many other systems. And so companies who know how to do those searches can have a huge advantage over finding people in something like a LinkedIn. So Bullhorn, which is used in many agencies, you can build previous titles, previous companies, and then also add different field searches as a current title and current company. And you don't have to be combined like it is in LinkedIn Recruiter. LinkedIn Recruiter defines the way many recruiters search, which is combining those things into one mega search, which oftentimes isn't easy to find because it's not the most accurate.
Catherine has a question that I really, when we talked about this last week, it's really something I think is important. And her question is more of a clarification, the difference between open to work on LinkedIn Recruiter and more likely to respond.
You can't be in both. That's one of the things that people don't realize. It's like being in stack A or stack B. So if you're building saved searches on LinkedIn Recruiter, build open to work first, because those would be your orange search. And then in my diagram here, your green search would be those most likely or possible to respond. They're not the same group. Just realize those two are two separate filters, and no one's going to be in both those filters. Two completely different stacks of candidates, and therefore your outreach might be very different as well.
Good point. That was new to me. I don't usually do search in LinkedIn Recruiter the same way, but I thought that's really profound. And what I really like about human predictions, and a lot of other companies are trying to determine what signals people are giving off on the web when it's time, when they might be thinking about moving. Not that they're declaring they're moving, but they're doing different kinds of web activities, and the tools that capture that are fascinating. And we should talk about that in a future.
I agree. Yeah. Those
It's
social indicators that people are
yeah,
trying to figure out, and they've been doing it for years, trying to figure out if somebody got this many recommendations and updated their vision, their personal picture, was that an indicator they were about ready to jump? Before we had the spotlight feature that actually says willing to work, we were always trying to figure out, well, what would make someone willing to work? If they got 2 recommendations and updated their picture, was that what people do before they start looking for a job?
yeah. Sean, did you see any questions that need to be answered?
No, I think you covered them all.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we'd really like to engage the audience more in a conversation. And so if you have specific questions, please put them in there.
I would love to know how some other people divide the work up, because
Yeah.
I've seen it by geography. I've seen recruiting teams divide it by time zone, because it's just easier to work in your own time zone. But when you come to how you search on a channel, maybe even in your applicant tracking system, do you look across the current job, people who applied for the current job, but then do you look across other jobs in other divisions of your same mega, big billion-dollar global corporation? Can you share the different divisions? I know you guys at Lockheed have, is it 5 or 6 divisions these days? I forget exactly. You guys keep changing the number of divisions you have.
we have 4 product business areas,
Okay.
and 1 sort of corporate it's a business area, but it's more serving the business areas themselves. So 4 groups create product, and the other helps support that.
And if you're working for a GE or an Amazon or a Google, or these big, Microsoft have many billion-dollar divisions. So
Right.
Do the recruiters in those other groups, is it one database, and can you search your own division first and then search the other divisions for qualified candidates who've applied in the past 90 days for those other companies that might be good repurposed without stepping on anybody's toes in the other division? Those are things that may be specific to your culture. I know most recruiters only look at the candidates that apply for their job, and then do a very minimalist search to look for previous candidates that applied for other previous jobs in their division, maybe even for that same manager in the previous year. But when you start asking them, well, did you search across the entire enterprise in a 3-state radius to see if anybody else has anybody that's good, not for this title, but for jobs similar categories that are nearby? And the answer is oftentimes, no, I don't want to step on their toes. They're not our candidates. But they're to the candidate, they just want to work for Microsoft. They just want to work for Lockheed Martin. They really didn't promise that they only wanted to work in one division. And unfortunately, a lot of candidates are being ignored because they only applied for one job in one division, and they just didn't go through the tedious process of applying to the other jobs, because they kind of thought, because somewhere in our small print, when the recruiter kicked them to the curb, the recruiter said, we'll keep you in mind for other jobs. We ping and search our database regularly, but they don't.
So most companies that I've worked for that are large share the common ATS. So everybody sees everybody coming in, maybe not internationally, but at least within the US, we see
able to see is, and try to interrupt, Mark, but it's able to see. Yes, I agree. They're able to see in these large Taleo or ISIM systems, but do they build searches to actually look to see?
They can. A lot of times we're doing it in a CRM now, so that there's that. But yeah, you can do that, and I think it's more geographical focused as opposed to business focused. So, where we're concerned with certain hubs of cleared talent, DC metro area, it makes no difference which business they had a rec that they may have applied for. We want them on ours, so we're going to pursue them. So I think it's a good point. A question I wanted to bounce back to and get your opinion on. One of the things that was shocking to me, going back 15 years or so ago, is when we started to become social recruiters and starting to use the different channels, Twitter, Facebook, all those different channels. And what I saw happening was more and more people would just put an ad out and think that, the whole idea behind social was to create a relationship. And all of a sudden it became just another channel that you fed jobs into. Can you talk a little bit about how you train people in general to look at those social channels and how each one is unique? How do you take them on?
Yeah, I believe, if we talk about recruiters have lots of tools in their toolbox, social media ends up being one category, and they're expected to know how to interact in more than a dozen social media environments. How you interact on something like a GitHub or a Stack Overflow is completely different than how you would interact on particular Twitter channels or Facebook groups. Okay, so the first thing is, before you start interacting, is become a lurker. Have your recruiters write kind of the textbook on how a candidate would be a member of a community as a job seeker. So how do job seekers find jobs on Facebook in a particular channel on Facebook? There are Facebook channels, for example, that are well known in the sourcing community and recruiting and talent acquisition community. Find those channels and see how people interact in those channels. Are they asking questions? Is it just a job board inside? Remember how there used to be Yahoo lists and other
Yes.
list servers out there that people could just subscribe to lists? Well, oftentimes these groups are generating lists, and it's very similar to the old list systems. So sometimes the communities are very, very welcome to just to post a job and everybody's great. You can still post jobs in many groups without any problem. Other groups, like tech groups inside GitHub and Stack Overflow, it is major taboo, and you don't get away with it twice. They will X you out of that program. But thousands of recruiters partake in GitHub groups and ask intelligent questions that will help them recruit. They even list themselves as recruiters. So there are recruiters who are welcome in the communities, that people see are recruiters, that aren't intrusive in the way they distribute the fact that they need candidates and they have jobs they're trying to fill. By just being present and having your title say, I'm in talent acquisition recruiter, if a candidate is a seeker and is looking to make a change, they will reach out to you if you're in the group, if you haven't alienated them through your rude conduct and misbehavior. And that includes not just posting jobs, but commenting on other people's things and advertising your job as part of the comment. There's a time and a place to describe your need. Quite frankly, I think any recruiter who just puts the fact that he has a title or in his comment, in his headline, let people know you're a recruiter, that's all you need. People know what recruiters do. They know how we make money. They know our job. You don't need to be on fire telling everybody everything you need every day.
One comment on that. I've always believed, and I built several talent communities over the years, is that you want to be a citizen, a good citizen of that community. It really is that simple. You're not going to live in a neighborhood and go down and insult some will, but usually we don't, and insult our neighbors. And I think that's the first thing we do is to learn what the rules of the game are. And
oftentimes I see organizations have one recruiter who's the social media recruiter, and they expect that one recruiter to partake in dozens of social media channels regularly, like they have an infinite amount of time. I just think it's too time consuming. I think it's better to have division of labor and give, when a recruiter on your team joins, you give them a list of groups that they might want to join, and you rotate them each 3 months, each 6 months, so different people can be members of different groups at different times, and they learn the etiquette from the person who was previously monitoring or part of the group. So if I was in a group for 6 months previously, and now I pass the baton to you, Marvin, as a new person, you get the rule book from me what should be done, and I no longer observe that group. I move on to a new group that I've been waiting to be, and it's not just added. I pass the baton on to the newer member of the team who, quite frankly, can mine in that same venue and might get better results than I did. I've seen women in social groups do very well when the same years of experience a male recruiter did very poorly in that group.
Right.
And it's just the dynamics. Different people interact in different ways, and their tone in their email and exchange can be very different in their headshot.
So you've got several things here. We're red, orange, green, and yellow. So if you're like a lot of our audience, I'm sure, are a full cycle recruiter, or we don't have too much time for sourcing. How do you prioritize this process? So you've worked as a sole practitioner before, I'm sure, and how do you don't have a split personality or 5 of them, do you? So I mean, how do you prioritize what works for you in that kind of situation?
I never build a search I can't use again later quickly. So efficiency is, I might have searches I've built previous years, previous days that are green and gold searches that are my barrel searches and my donut searches. I might need to build a new tabletop search or tablecloth search that are fresh and new. So I start with my orange and I say, let's find someone who's nearest and newest, or my core search first. So that bright yellow or the orange, I start there first. Then with a slight modification, I then can modify that search to be a tablecloth search, which is a futuristic save search that is bringing in and finding people every day. A lot of the systems now have AI, LinkedIn Recruiter, for example, and other tools that once you start adding people to your folders, and you start hiding people from the search that you don't like, the AI is becoming trained and will recommend 25 new, these would be tablecloths candidates every day. So tap into the AI from the byproduct of thumbs up and thumbs down with candidates to train it what you like. And the best example I tell people is, we're all watching too much Netflix these days. If you haven't figured out on Netflix how to do thumbs up or thumbs down after you watch something you like or hate, or even just going through a bunch of things that you hate that you'll never watch and putting thumbs down, then suddenly your Netflix recommendations, the AI that's going to recommend what you want to couch potato binge watch this weekend, will really, really improve. And recruiters need to look at it as the same way. Every candidate you look at, every search you have, measure it. Was it a thumbs up search or a thumbs down search? And were the candidates I liked? Because many of the systems that have AI built are watching what you do and monitoring your likes and dislikes to recommend better candidates to you. So that's how I do it. Use searches over and over, save them, refine them, and vote frequently, even for things you don't like, because then the AI starts sending you things that you do like.
Good. Catherine had a question, and I'll take a shot at it first, and then you can go. Have you had much success or luck with social media recruiting for engineers? And for me, to be honest, the best luck I have, or the best success I have, is, let's take Twitter, for example. If you go and follow a professional association's Twitter account, a lot of times you'll see lists of people that are following them, or you'll see people that have that common interest in that association. So systems engineer, the group is called INCOSI that people belong to. And so you can see several hundred people that work for a number of different companies that you can go and harvest that information, and it worked that way for me. But in terms of just generally searching, I find if we can find a segment that, people are loyal to their professions, and if you can find those kind of things, you'll be more successful. Eric, what do you think?
I melded my social media searches with my concept of referral searches. If I found a developer and through my recruiting process in interviewing him, and I asked him, what social media activities do you normally do? And he says, I am a member of these 3 open source communities or these 3 chat rooms. And because I'm asking him, how are you looking for a job? Tell me a little bit about how you
Mhm.
normally do, because I want to get into their mindset. And they tell me those things. I simply jot those down. And then I, on a regular basis, will communicate with that individual who I knows have access points to those channels. And I
Mhm.
simply make sure that he knows my current hot openings and that he will either get a paid referral for that or will basically be my bird dog looking in those channels and communicating my message out to his communities. So I don't have to be part of those communities. I don't have time for it. And quite frankly, I don't speak to speak. He's already in the community. He just becomes an advocate for my recruiting because I treated him well. Even if I didn't get him a job, he likes me and will send me referrals. So I combine those 2 together.
Cool. Sean, did you have? We're 9 minutes from the top of the hour, so I just wanted to check in with you real quick.
Yeah, I get kind of a general topic question where we're kind of talking about, this comes back down to the workflow that you guys have been talking about. Are we mainly running this workflow rec by rec, or is it sort of like this more of a talent pipeline or job profile focus that just keeps running and running throughout the year, maybe year over year? How do you tune in, or what are your thoughts around that? Is it rec focused or is it pipeline focused?
Great question. So when I worked in an RPO in an agency environment, it's very different than I worked with a large corporation in talent acquisition supporting the same group of managers in that business unit. In the RPO, literally, we could have dozens of clients similar to an agency, different clients in different parts of the country, different industries, different needs, different size clients. So in that case, it was rec by rec. Each rec we brought in, we did either a core search or we had a different playbook for that type of rec. A playbook for a permanent job is very different than the playbook for a contract 3-month project. A sales job is very different playbook than an engineering or accounting job. So we would look at what came in on a per rec basis, pull the right operating manual off the shelf, and follow the playbook that was defined through multiple iterations. That you know, and each quarter they kind of looked at the playbook. And really, it's just a PowerPoint presentation. It says, okay, if the job comes in to meet this spec, go grab this PowerPoint presentation or go to this section in your manual and review what's worked previously. The best company I've ever did work with, they actually had clients in Bullhorn at the client record level, not at the hiring manager level, at the client level record. They had the preferred process and operation that anybody working that client should follow those instructions. So
Wow.
Microsoft had their submittal instructions, and we searched these channels for Microsoft because we know that they didn't have access to those job boards or those access points. And another client, we had different channels because we know that they had access to the things, and we would have a high degree of submittals that were rejected because they go, oh, we already have that person. We search that channel daily already. So we found that, some of the diversity channels that we knew that we normally searched, but Microsoft or Coca-Cola was already searching those diversity channels. We would not spend a lot of time searching those because all the candidates were already picked from the trees there. So we'd focus on our diversity candidates, completely different channels. Same thing with in the clearance job space. If you know your client has access to these 3 clearance job type boards, you better not be sending candidates only from those boards. You're gonna starve.
Yeah, amen. That's the story of my life. Thank you. For me, just quickly, I probably work more events and pipelines and programs where we're looking for general skill sets. And then as a sourcer, I'm interested in finding as many people as possible and then allowing the recruiter through a handoff to work on the specific, apply them to the specific recs. And as somebody in engagement, I'm also interested in a long-term relationship with that person. So I'm going to use content and those kind of things to nurture that relationship. So it's not just a one and done kind of thing.
Okay, so one final question for you here. So this is all about researching and searching and collecting, right? If you
Right.
getting to your drilling down in your point about all the the apples have been picked from that tree. Why do we keep going back, right? Why repeat what we already done, already know? When you pull the apples from the tree, or you're collecting these candidates, are you bringing them back into like an engagement layer or what have you? Eric, I think you mentioned the next step of engagement earlier. Are we collecting and putting into a certain spot and then working through another engagement workflow?
Yes, I separate identification from engagement or outreach. Okay, one can, and the way I like to say it is, there are people who are really good at research that don't like talking to people and don't write very well. I would be partly in that category. I really like research, and I really like staying up late at night when I can't talk to anybody and doing, going down the rabbit hole and just looking for people that no one else in the world has found. Okay, there are other recruiters who are amazingly good at telling stories. They're verbal people. They're amazing recruiters who can write the most marketing copy and that spell correctly and have great visual acuity and make things look pretty when they come in your email. That's not me. I have to really work hard to have that skill set on the engagement side. So I've been affectionately calling those two groups typers and talkers. The typers are the researchers, the talkers, and the typers and talkers sometimes are in the same person. People are balanced, and those are called full lifecycle recruiters or full lifecycle sourcers, okay, where they can actually do their own identification and outreach. But on the teams that I built, I found that I could afford typers and I could afford talkers. And oftentimes the budgets I had in RPO, I could not afford the hybrid that could do both. And so I would look for people who are really good researchers, or look for people who are bad researchers, but could take the research given to them by another sourcer and do amazingly well talking to a dozen candidates a day and working the list built by someone completely different, in some cases a different country or a different continent. So I like combining typers and talkers, and we used to call it at Ronstadt, SourceRight, role specialization. If you don't have the ability to do role specialization, which in my opinion is cheaper, but does require more headcount, then you got to figure out how to divide your time so that you can, and Glenn Cathy calls that time blocking, divide your time so you're not constantly distracted. When you're in your research mode, don't be in your engagement mode. And when you're in your engagement mode, the only research you should do is verbal research. Ask every candidate for referrals. But other than that, don't be talking to a candidate and interviewing them while surfing the web on your other browser and not listening.
I did say final question. I may have lied. If there's time, Antonia is asking to Eric, what were some of the diversity channels?
Tony, I will say, if you send me an email, Jake at seekout.io is my email address. I will send you a short list. The easy answer is they kept changing and they still change. And the best diversity channels I found were not diversity channels at all. They were normal channels searched with a diversity lens.
Cool. Have you ever heard the term stockpiling? Amy Brett Quinn, one of my favorite talent sourcers, brought this up, and she's a leader now in talent sourcing, but she brought this up the other day, and that was a new term for me. They were talking of the difference between talent pipelining and talent stockpiling. Just finding the people and having them ready to go, but not engaging them. And I hadn't really ever heard that context before.
Yeah, I mean, I think stockpiling is the new, candidate pool. People talked about having, a community or a pool of candidates. I think it's the same thing, different label. Community and talent pools have been around for a long time. Unfortunately, I think most companies, and Doug Berg and I had this conversation many times, and he built a whole company, his previous company, Jobs to Web, around this concept of talent pools. And he and I discussed many times how a talent pool is if not done properly, is just a mailing list where you have no relationships and nothing is segmented. And quite frankly, it becomes an angry mob. So your talent pool turns into a cesspool really, really quickly. And the cesspool is not what you want to build. So as long as your stockpile doesn't become into a stockpile of radioactive nuclear waste, you'll be fine.
Cool. Anyway, thank you. Sean, back to you. I see we're at time.
Yep, we're at time. Thank you guys so much. I thought that was a great conversation. Eric and Marvin, you guys certainly taken sourcing to whole other levels of sourcing, strategic sourcing, and pipelining. So much appreciated, and much appreciated to the audience. I know we're coming up on the holiday week. I encourage everybody to enjoy the holiday as best they can. I'm going to certainly try on my end, but yeah, Eric's ready for it.
I'm going skiing.
I like it.
So Eric and Marvin, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your weekend and your holiday week. We'll talk together soon.
Be safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'll stay on for a second, Sean.
Yep, I'm here.
If you want, I'll share my desktop real quick and show you that virtual desktop, or actually I can run you through it real quick.
Well, let me end this, and then
Yep.
can I just zoom you real quick? Is that all right?
Yep, that's perfect. Yeah, we'll finish it up. And
Yeah, I'll
Marvin,
end
if you want to
this
join
up.
us, you can.
All right, perfect.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.